They took an Apache woman, and a legendary cowboy turned the night into a judgment. Far from the towns, far from the noise of wagons and rails, a small Apache camp rested between dark hills and open land. Elena sat near the fire, her hands steady as she worked with leather. She was young, but her eyes carried the weight of many seasons. She had learned early that the world did not stop just because someone was tired or afraid. Her people had been pushed again and again, told where they could and could not stand, could and could not breathe. Still they lived. Still they remembered. The fire crackled softly. Children slept close to their mothers. Elders spoke in low voices, sharing stories meant to remind them who they were. Elena listened without turning her head. She always listened. Silence had taught her more than words ever could. She felt it before she heard it. A shift in the air, a wrongness. Her fingers paused. The wind had changed, not in direction but in meaning. Somewhere beyond the firelight, a sound was swallowed too quickly, like a footstep pressed hard into sand. Elena stood slowly. She did not call out. She did not panic. She had been raised to know that fear could be louder than a shout. The night exploded. Men rushed from the darkness, their movements rough and rushed. They shouted over one another, voices sharp with panic and greed. Firelight jumped wildly as bodies collided. Someone screamed. A child cried. An elder fell. Elena moved, but a hand closed around her arm like iron. She fought, kicking and twisting, but there were too many of them. One man struck the ground near her feet to scare her. Another pulled her backward, away from the fire, away from the voices of her people. She looked once, just once, over her shoulder. The camp was chaos. Smoke rose where the fire had been kicked apart. Shadows moved too fast to count. She memorized everything, the sounds, the shapes, the smell of fear, because she did not know if she would ever see it again. Then the darkness closed in. They tied her hands and pushed her forward. She stumbled but did not fall. She refused to give them that. The men spoke in low tones as they moved, arguing about direction, about speed, about money. They talked as if she were not there, as if she were already an object, already gone. Elena said nothing. The desert stretched wide and empty. Stars watched without judgment. Each step burned into her legs, but she counted them anyway. She counted time by breath and distance by pain. She remembered her father's voice from long ago. Survive first. Everything else comes later. Hours passed, or maybe it was less. Time did strange things when fear sat heavy in the chest. When they finally stopped, it was near a cluster of rocks that broke the wind. The men lit a small fire, careful to keep it low. One of them laughed too loudly and was told to shut up. Another paced like an animal that did not trust the dark. They tied Elena to a post driven into the ground. Not tight enough to cut skin, tight enough to remind her she was trapped. She lowered her head, letting her hair fall forward. Let them think she was small. Let them think she was done. Inside, her mind was sharp. She watched their boots. She listened to how they spoke to one another, who was nervous, who was cruel, who drank too much. She learned their weaknesses the way others learned prayers. One man looked at her too long. Another avoided her eyes. A third kept checking the darkness like he expected it to answer back. They did not know it yet, but the night was already changing. Far away, beyond the hills and broken trails, a town slept under weak lantern light. Wood buildings leaned into one another as if sharing secrets. A saloon stood at the edge of the street, quieter than usual. Inside, a man sat alone. His name was Caleb. Most people in town knew him by stories, not by conversation. He was older now, his hair touched with gray, his movements slower but deliberate. He did not drink much. He did not speak unless necessary. He had learned that words, like bullets, should be used carefully. A man at the bar whispered to another, glancing toward Caleb. Stories always traveled faster than truth. Caleb paid them no attention. He stared into his cup, not really seeing it. His mind was somewhere else, somewhere long buried. Then the door opened. A rider stepped in, dust-covered and tense. He scanned the room like someone carrying bad news. When his eyes found Caleb, he hesitated, then walked over. "You still owe a life," the rider said quietly. Caleb looked up. The words settled heavy between them. The rider leaned closer. They took an Apache woman last night, near the eastern hills. A hand pulling him from blood and sand years ago. What's her name? Caleb asked. Elena. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Conversation stopped. Everyone watched. I'm not the law, Caleb said to the rider, and I don't chase trouble anymore. Told himself the world no longer needed men like him. He was wrong. By dawn, he would be gone. Back in the desert, Elena closed her eyes, not in sleep, but in focus. She did not know who might come. She did not know if anyone would, but she knew this: she would not disappear quietly. The night held its breath. Somewhere a horse was being saddled. Somewhere a path was being chosen. And the darkness, for the first time, began to feel watched. Morning came slowly, like it was unsure whether it should arrive at all. The desert sky changed color little by little, from deep black to soft gray, then to pale gold. The cold of the night loosened its grip, but the air was still sharp. Caleb rode east. His horse moved at a steady pace, trained to travel long distances without complaint. Caleb did not rush. He never did. Rushing made people careless, and carelessness had buried too many good men. He followed signs others would miss. A broken twig that did not belong. A stone turned over where it should not be. Faint marks in the sand that told a story to anyone patient enough to read it. He had learned these skills long ago, not from books or teachers, but from survival. Back then, mistakes meant more than pain. They meant endings. As he rode, memories followed him like shadows. He remembered Elena's father clearly. A strong man, quiet, with eyes that missed nothing. Years ago, Caleb had been left wounded after a fight that should have killed him. He had expected the desert to finish the job. Instead, a hand had pulled him back from the edge. No reward was asked, no thanks expected. Live, the man had said simply. Caleb had lived, and now that life was calling in a way he could not ignore. By midday, the sun was high, pressing down on the land. Caleb stopped near a dry stretch of ground and let his horse drink from his canteen. He scanned the horizon slowly, his eyes calm but alert. He found what he was looking for near a cluster of rocks. Tracks, not just one set but many, heavy boots, careless steps, men who believed they had nothing to fear. They moved fast at first, then slower. Fear had crept in later. Caleb knelt and touched the ground lightly. The marks were fresh enough. He was close. He stood and followed. Each mile told him more. These were not men who belonged to the land. They cut across open ground instead of using cover. They talked too loudly. They believed numbers would protect them. Caleb shook his head. Numbers had never meant much when judgment came calling. As the sun dipped lower, he reached a ridge that overlooked a narrow valley. Smoke rose faintly from below. Someone had tried to hide a fire and failed. Caleb tied his horse and moved on foot. He moved like he belonged there, like the land itself had learned his shape. His boots made no sound. His breath stayed slow and steady. He did not think about what he would do when he reached them. Thinking too far ahead could cloud the moment. He watched first. There were 5 men, tired, uneasy. One argued with another in a low voice. A third paced back and forth. The 4th sat too close to the fire. The 5th kept looking into the distance like he knew something was wrong but did not know what. And there, tied but unbroken, was Elena. She sat straight despite the rope. Her face was calm, but her eyes were alive. They followed everything. She was not waiting to be saved. She was waiting for a chance. Caleb felt a quiet respect settle in his chest. Night fell again, faster this time. The men grew careless as darkness returned. They believed the hard part was over. They talked about tomorrow, about where they would go next. They spoke like people who thought the future belonged to them. Elena listened. She noticed how one man favored his right side. How another drank too much when nervous. How the one with the sharpest voice was the weakest inside. She also noticed something else. The night felt different. Sounds carried strangely. The wind shifted without reason. Once she thought she heard a soft movement beyond the rocks, but when she looked there was nothing. Still, her heart beat faster. Somewhere nearby, something had changed. Caleb waited until the fire burned low. He waited until the men's voices softened and their movements slowed. He waited until the land itself seemed ready. Then he moved. One man wandered away from the group, just a few steps, just enough. He never raised his voice. He never reached the others. Fear spread quietly after that, a missing shape, a silence that did not belong. Whispers started. Accusations followed. Alina watched carefully. She saw the moment when they realized they were no longer alone. One man grabbed his weapon too fast and dropped it. Another cursed the dark. The leader tried to sound confident, but his voice cracked. Caleb did not announce himself. He let the night speak for him. By the time the moon stood high, only 2 men remained near the fire. They stood back to back, breathing hard, eyes wide. Alina felt the rope around her wrists loosen suddenly. She did not turn. "Don't look yet," a low voice said behind her. She froze, not from fear but from recognition. That voice carried weight, not anger, not pride, purpose. Caleb cut the rest of the rope. "You can walk?" he asked. "Yes," Alina said. He stepped into view then, slow and calm. Older than she expected, tired but unbroken. "You should go now," he said. "Head west until the land opens. Don't stop until dawn." She moved into the darkness, quiet as breath. As she walked, she did not run. Running meant panic. She trusted the land to guide her. Each step took her farther from danger and closer to herself. Behind her, the night grew still again. When dawn finally came, it found the desert quiet. Caleb stood alone on the ridge as the sun rose. His work was done. He did not stay to watch the light spread. He turned back toward his horse, toward the road that would carry him away. Alina reached high ground and stopped. She looked back once. The land looked the same as it always had. Endless, silent, honest. But she knew better. Some nights changed everything. And some men, no matter how hard they tried to leave the past behind, were meant to answer when it called. The desert looked different when Alina walked it alone. In the early morning light, the land stretched wide and open, painted in soft gold and pale brown. The danger of the night had passed, but its memory stayed close, like a shadow that refused to leave. Every sound made her pause. Every movement of wind through dry grass reminded her that survival did not end just because the sun had risen. She moved carefully, choosing her steps with purpose. Her body ached. Her wrists were sore where the rope had been. Her legs felt heavy from hours of walking in fear, but she did not slow down. Pain was something she understood. It was familiar. It did not control her. She followed the land west just as Caleb had told her. The ground slowly changed. Sharp stones gave way to flatter paths. Small plants appeared, stubborn and alive. These signs told her she was moving in the right direction. She drank small sips of water, saving what she could. Her people had taught her never to trust that help would come quickly. As the sun climbed higher, heat wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. She stopped briefly near a group of rocks to rest in the shade. Her mind finally allowed itself to think beyond the next step. She thought about the night again, the way the men had spoken as if she were nothing, the way they believed strength meant noise and numbers. They had never understood that silence could be stronger. And then there was Caleb. She did not know much about him, but she knew enough. The way he moved. The way he spoke without wasting words. The way the night itself seemed to step aside for him. He had not acted like a hero from stories. He had acted like someone who understood cost. That mattered. Alina rested only a short time. Staying still for too long invited danger of another kind. She stood and continued. By late afternoon, she reached higher ground and saw something that made her chest loosen for the first time since the attack. Smoke, thin and steady, rising from far away. A camp. Not a large one, but familiar in shape and rhythm. She watched for a long moment, making sure it was safe. When she finally approached, voices reached her ears, soft, measured, spoken in her own language. She stepped forward and was seen. There was surprise, there were questions. There were hands that reached for her, not to take but to steady. Alina allowed herself to sit. Water was given to her. Food followed. She ate slowly, carefully, letting strength return one breath at a time. An older woman touched her face gently, checking for injury. Alina shook her head. "I'm alive," she said. That was enough. As evening came, the camp grew quiet. People listened as Alina spoke. She did not tell every detail. She did not need to. They understood fear without explanation. They understood loss even more. When she finished, silence settled over them. "The land watched over you," someone said. Alina looked toward the darkening sky. So did someone else. Some things deserved privacy. Far from the camp, Caleb rode alone again. The desert did not ask him where he was going. It never did. It simply opened and closed as it always had. His horse moved steadily beneath him. Caleb's body felt heavier than it had in years, not from effort but from memory. The past had a way of waking up when disturbed. He stopped near a dry creek as night fell and made a small fire, careful and controlled. He fed his horse and sat with his back against a rock, eyes scanning the dark out of habit. He thought about Alina walking away. He hoped she would reach her people. He believed she would. Caleb did not think of himself as a good man. He had done too much to wear that title comfortably. But he believed in balance, in answering wrongs when they showed their face. Tonight had been one of those times. Sleep came lightly. He woke at every sound, every shift of wind. When morning came, he put out the fire and rode on. The town appeared by midday. It looked the same as it always had: dusty street, quiet buildings, tired faces. But Caleb knew something inside him had changed again. He stopped at the edge of town, considering whether to pass through or around it. Before he could decide, a familiar voice called out, "You look like a man who finished something." She made it back. She helped where she could. She walked the land with elders, listening to stories meant to anchor the young and remind the old of who they were. But something inside her had shifted. She no longer felt like someone waiting for life to happen. She had seen how quickly everything could be taken, and how quietly it could be returned. One evening she stood on a rise and watched the sunset bleed into the hills. The colors were deep and endless, beautiful in a way that did not ask permission. She thought about the world beyond her people's lands, about towns and trails and men who believed the land belonged to them. She did not feel fear. She felt clarity. The past would not loosen its grip easily, but she would not let it define her. Far away, Caleb rode toward nothing in particular. He did not know where he would stop. He did not need to. The road would decide, as it always had. As the sun dipped low, he felt the familiar pull to keep moving. But he also felt something new, a quiet sense that, for once, the scales were balanced. Not perfectly, but enough. The desert settled into night again. Stars appeared, steady and unchanged. And somewhere between the open land and the long road, two lives moved forward, separate but shaped by the same night that refused to stay silent. The days after the night did not bring peace as easily as Alina had hoped. The land was calm, but calm did not always mean safe. Word traveled fast across the frontier, even without voices. People noticed when men did not return. They noticed when fear replaced confidence. They noticed when the balance shifted. Alina felt it in small ways. A quiet tension in the camp, elders speaking more carefully, scouts watching the horizon longer than usual. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood the same truth. When wrong was answered, it rarely ended cleanly. She continued her daily work, helping where she could, moving with purpose, but her senses stayed sharp. The night had changed her. She trusted herself now in a way she had not before. She had seen what strength looked like when it was quiet. One evening, a scout returned late. He did not sit down. He did not drink water. He stood at the edge of the camp and spoke softly to the elders. Alina watched their faces tighten. She stepped closer. "More men," the scout said. "Not close yet, but they are asking questions. They are angry." She lay awake, listening to the wind move through the land, listening for signs that did not belong. When dawn came, she made a decision. She went to the elders. "I won't wait for them to come here," she said. "Waiting gives fear time to grow." "What do you plan to do?" She moved south toward rough ground and narrow passes, places where the land could speak for her. By the second day, she knew she was being followed. She did not panic. Panic wasted energy. She let her pace stay steady. She let her tracks be seen when she wanted them to be seen. She hid them when it mattered. The men behind her were cautious but determined. They stayed far enough back to feel safe. They believed time was on their side. They were wrong. As the sun lowered on the third day, Alina reached a stretch of land she knew well. Rocks rose unevenly, creating blind turns and narrow paths. Wind cut through the area sharply, carrying sound in strange ways. She slowed. She waited. Far away, another man felt the pull of unfinished business. Caleb had tried to ride past it. He had taken a different road, told himself his part was done, but the land had a way of refusing lies. He heard it in a town he barely stopped in. Whispers, half-stories, fear trying to hide behind humor. Someone mentioned an Apache woman moving alone. Caleb turned his horse around. He followed quietly, reading the land like an old friend's face. He recognized the signs immediately. Someone skilled was leading someone foolish. He smiled once briefly. By nightfall, he was close enough to feel the tension in the air. Alina heard him before she saw him, not his steps, his presence. She did not turn right away. "You shouldn't have followed," she said softly. Caleb stopped beside her, his voice calm. "Neither should they." When the men entered the narrow pass, fear arrived before they did. Rocks shifted. Wind carried sounds that made them hesitate. Shapes appeared where there should have been none. They realized too late that the land had chosen a side. Caleb did not rush. He never did. He moved with precision, using darkness and distance. Each step removed certainty from the men following them. Confidence broke apart quietly. Alina watched and learned. She saw how patience worked, how silence spoke louder than threat, how judgment did not need anger to be final. By the time the moon reached its highest point, the pass was empty. The land was quiet again. Alina and Caleb stood at opposite ends of the narrow trail, looking at the same stars. "It's finished," she said. "For now," Caleb replied. She turned to him. "You don't have to keep doing this." And it knew this truth better than anyone. Some nights were not about darkness, but about balance finding its way back. The land felt quieter after everything that had happened, but it was not an empty quiet. It was the kind that came after a storm, when the air still carried memory, but the danger had passed. Alina walked north with steady steps. Her body was tired, but her mind was clear. Each mile felt lighter than the last, not because the road was easy, but because she was no longer running from fear. She was choosing her direction. When she reached her people, they welcomed her without questions. They saw the change in her eyes. They saw the calm strength that had replaced uncertainty. No one asked her to explain. Survival did not need explanation. Life slowly returned to its rhythm. Days passed. Fires were lit. Food was prepared. Stories were told at night, not about fear, but about endurance. Children listened closely, learning without knowing they were learning. Alina took her place among them again, but she was not the same woman who had been taken from the fire that night. She listened more deeply now. She spoke when it mattered. People noticed. Elders began to ask her thoughts. Younger ones followed her when she walked the land. She did not seek this role, but she did not refuse it either. Responsibility, like survival, was something that found you when you were ready. One evening, she stood alone on a ridge as the sun set. The sky burned with color, deep red and soft gold. The land stretched wide and honest in front of her. For the first time in a long while, she felt something close to peace. She thought of the night again, not with fear, but with understanding. Some moments did not exist to break you. They existed to reveal you. Far away, Caleb rode through a stretch of land that did not carry a name. He had stopped trying to decide where he belonged. Belonging, he had learned, was not always a place. Sometimes it was a moment when you did what needed to be done. He passed through towns without staying. People recognized him sometimes. Most did not. That suited him. The stories followed anyway. They changed with each telling, growing louder, sharper, more dramatic. Caleb ignored them. Truth did not need decoration. One night he stopped near a river and watched the water move slowly under the moonlight. He thought about the life he had lived, the choices he had made, the ones he had avoided. For the first time in years, the weight felt lighter. Not gone, but balanced. He slept deeply that night. When morning came, he felt older and younger at the same time. The road ahead did not scare him anymore. Back with her people, Alina faced a choice she had known was coming. A nearby settlement sent word. They wanted to talk, not to threaten, not to demand, to listen. The elders gathered. "Will you go?" one of them asked Alina. She did not answer right away. The past had taught her caution, but it had also taught her something else. Silence could protect, but it could also limit. "Yes," she said. "I will go." Time moved forward. Seasons shifted. Alina became someone people sought when decisions felt heavy. She did not lead with force. She led with clarity. She remembered what it meant to be taken and what it meant to walk back under her own strength. Sometimes, at night, she looked toward the open land and wondered where Caleb was. She did not hope for his return. She respected his road too much for that. Some people were not meant to stay. They were meant to pass through and leave the world quieter than they found it. Caleb, meanwhile, found himself slowing, not stopping, just listening more. He helped when needed. He walked away when not. He learned when to let the land solve its own problems. One afternoon, he came across a group of travelers struggling to cross rough ground. He showed them a safer path and moved on before thanks could grow heavy. That was enough. Years later, long after stories had settled into memory, someone would speak of an Apache woman who refused to disappear. Someone else would speak of a cowboy who never chased praise. They would not realize they were talking about the same night. The desert would remember, it always did. And in that remembering, balance remained, not perfect, not permanent, but alive. Alina stood once more on the ridge as the sun set, older now, steadier. She closed her eyes and breathed. The land answered. Some nights ended in darkness. Others ended in judgment. But the rarest ones ended in truth. And those were the nights that changed everything.